Buenos días. Bienvenidos a IDR. Let us begin. Welcome to the last session of IDR for IETF 123. This is a reminder for all of you to scan in at the QR code to check in. We have a little bit of slack at our agenda this morning, so there's a chance for some agenda bashing. So you've seen the note well throughout this week. You are bound by the various things in the note well. You should have read it at some point. It's worth rereading periodically. It includes things like intellectual property considerations that are important. Similarly, we have IETF code of conduct things which we're all bound by. They largely come down to be generally respectful to other people and argue make your arguments to the arguments rather than to the people. So our agenda today is going to be the following. We're going to be talking about moving things to full standard. John will be leading this discussion. There is time in the schedule for a discussion. We actually would like to hear from people, based on what he's about to present on how we should proceed through this rather substantial bit of work. We'll be having a presentation on path attribute filtering. Srihari will be again discussing dynamic capabilities and how things have changed since last IETF. We'll be having a refresher for the secondary label discussion. The authors are desiring a reset for the discussion on this. We'll be having a discussion about flow spec IFIT mechanisms. And the final one for the day will be unreachable prefix announcement discussion. Do we have any agenda bashing before we get started? Okay, seeing nothing online, our first presentation is John.
Thank you. Okay, hi everybody. I'm John. Yeah, so I don't know, a few meetings back, I had this conversation with, some of the people up in the front of the room and some of the people in the room and some of the people online, and the topic came around to we've had this thing in draft standard or below for the last 31 years. 1654 was 31 years ago today. 1771 was 1 year after that. 4271 was, I think, 2006. So we seem to be doing some kind of like exponential back off thing in terms of like actually achieving internet standard. And I think, one of the questions that that I ask myself and that you should be asking yourself is, is it worth putting in the, I think what you'll come to agree is like quite substantial effort to move this thing to full standard, worth doing just, to kind of get the participation prize of having a STD number? And the answer is no, but I hope I will convince you that it's still worth doing. Oh, and by the way, this has been chartered work. Like it's got its own bullet on the charter since 2010. So I'm not sure if I know of any examples of other work that's chartered in a working group that hasn't had a draft for 15 years after it's been added to the charter. Anyway, but here we are. So and I kind of feel like the dog that caught the car, or some other metaphor, where I was like, I'd be willing to work on that after I'm done being AD, and I was hoping somebody would say, no, don't do that. And nobody said no. So here I am. So, always the first question, if you're going to go the final step to make something an internet standard, is, are we ready? I mean, I think hopefully everybody in this room feels in their heart that yes, we're ready. But the definition is really pretty simple: a high degree of technical maturity and a belief that the protocol provides significant benefit to the internet community. Anyone who doesn't believe that BGP provides a significant benefit to the internet community is probably not in this room and is probably not on the internet also. So yes, we can do it. The next question I had is there in that bottom bullet, which is, there is a process by which the IESG can just say, yep, you've had enough bake time, your protocol's good, we're just reclassifying you as an internet standard. And, you know, full of hope and wonder, I crossed my fingers, did a pass through the doc and was like, can we do that? No, we cannot. There's at least 2 criteria that we fail on. So BCP 9 gives us a pretty simple list of 4 criteria, and the 2 circled ones, you know, it's just kind of obvious. We have a bunch of errata open against us, and if you go through the spec, you will see that it documents what we do, but it documents some fairly substantial things that we don't do as well. So I think we have to fix them. And I'm taking the liberty of adding one more bullet that I think is in the spirit of those, which is whether there are errata or not, we should produce a spec that does not have known errors. Like it is kind of our responsibility to the generations that come to hand them a spec that isn't going to lead them into, you know, temptation. If somebody sits down and implements it, they will produce something that actually works. So, you know, we could be very processy and say, well, anything that you think is an error has to have an errata open against it. So for tracking, blah, 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 blah. But I think we have other ways to do tracking, and we should anyway produce a spec that doesn't have known errors that would cause interoperability problems. And finally, one more kind of helpful, this was helpful to me anyway, processy thing about the standardization process, which is an RFC can be an internet standard. An internet standard does not have to be a single RFC. This will be helpful for us, as you'll see in the coming slides. In other words, you can have a cluster of RFCs that together form an internet standard. So that third criterion, unused features, having done a couple scrubs through the document now, there are several. Sort of the one that popped out at me the first is there's quite a few pages in the spec devoted to aggregation. Almost everything that is said in there is either something that didn't get implemented, something that got implemented but didn't get used, and in actually a bunch of cases is stuff that we have subsequently deprecated. You know, we just published RFC 9774, which deprecates ASSET. I'll come back to that. Those who've been hanging out in this group for a while remember that every few years, decades, something, we talk about timers, how the description of various of the timers, notably the minimum route advertisement interval, but not only that, how some of those timers are really kind of fictional. And I think it's fairly likely that none of the implementations that we're shipping or that you're deploying do exactly what the spec says. If we can do better, we should. And I'm sure this list isn't complete. This is just some examples to kind of motivate the fact that, yeah, we got some work to do. On the other hand, everybody in this room, or many of the people, probably have something that they really wish we had done differently back in 1994. One of my favorite examples is non-key fields in NLRI. I do not love them. But it is just clearly beyond the scope of this effort to go and fix the protocol to be what we wish it was instead of what it is. In my opinion, the scope of this effort is to make the document reflect the world. So I think that we must not, in our work, change the documented design beyond the deployed design. I think that we may fix our terminology, we may clarify points. We shouldn't do it just for fun, but there are cases where the terminology is unclear enough that it would be worth fixing. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but just, you know, after having written that previous bullet, I sort of challenged myself to say, okay, what would you know, an example of a justified change be? And for example, if you go through the document, we're fairly loose about interchanging the words NLRI prefix. Is NLRI a section of the update that contains multiple NLRI, but how do we distinguish between those in speech? So we have an existence proof that the spec is good enough, is clear enough. Like, we all have implementations that we're shipping and running, and you know, it works, but I think we can do better in some cases. And one other thing I noticed as I was scrubbing the spec is there happily is not too much abuse of the RFC 2119 keywords in the spec. You know, 2119 is the thing that says, you know, should, must, may, and, you know, shall, et cetera, all those definitions of the capital keywords. But there are some cases where we use should in a way that's a little questionable. Generally, the question that comes up from reviewers who care about this stuff when they see should is, it's like a little flashing red light that says, oh, okay, I should do this, and that means that I might not do this. And what are the cases when I would choose not to do this? There must be some sensible case you have in mind. So I think we should, you know, at least as we're doing our work, we should review those. And this is one case where I think we could consider upgrading things to must. You know, with due consideration. Again, the goal of upgrading, you know, or the sort of the test for whether it would be okay to upgrade something to a must would be people should be able to comply with that by a code review. And my canonical example is, you know, we don't say you must zero your empty subfields, but if there is anybody here who has an implementation that doesn't zero memory on allocation, you know, I'd be interested in knowing about it. I bet that everybody does. I mean, it's just, you know, sort of generally good software engineering practice. That's just an example. Oh, and you know, we've been doing this the last 31 years. Our work is never done. We'll do this. We'll produce, I hope, a 4271 BIS. We will not be done because everybody has ideas of things that should go into the protocol. Well, here I talk about TUR. Maybe if we do a good enough job on BIS, we should even think about doing a BGP5. I don't know. But you know, put all those ideas for changing and improving the protocol off to one side so that we can get this work done, and then we can come back to this stuff. So, hope everyone's with me so far. Question is, so just as a review, number one, I've tried to motivate, we need to do a 4271 BIS. Number two is I pointed out we don't have to put everything into the BIS. We have other tools at our disposal as well. So what goes into the standard, which can be a cluster of RFCs? Number one, I think that the BIS should be sort of as small a revision as we can get away with. 6 months ago, I would have said, we're just going to go and like fix the errata, boom, ship it, done. But having done the scrub, I think we can't, but we should still keep it as small as we can. So first of all, we all know that just a 4271 implementation all by itself isn't going to get you very far. If you're somebody came to you and said, I'm going to implement 4271 and it'll be great. You would say, maybe go look at these other things as well because your thing will be useless. Notably, 4271 does not include IPv6 support. There is exactly 0 chance that we would get that approved as an internet standard as an IPv4 only protocol. Let's not try. So our goal should be that we put together at least the sort of minimal credible set of specifications. Of course, I guess it's still worth saying. And the best heuristic I could come up with for what goes into the BIS document itself is only stuff that it would be painful and weird not to put it in, should go in there. And I have some examples coming up. So, sort of I think 3 out of the 4 of these are just kind of like, yeah, obviously they just flow in. AS-wide unique identifier, codification of AS0 processing, and default propagation behavior. Those are all kind of like, well, one of my rules of thumb, by the way, was like, if it looks mostly like, if we have an RFC that looks mostly like a patch, it just says, RFC 4271 says old text. It should say new text. There, that's it, that's the whole RFC. We have some RFCs like that. Those we should just patch in, done. The one here that I struggled with was RFC 7606, error handling. That's a big spec. I really didn't want to touch it. I really didn't. But not touching it would mean publishing a 4271 BIS with an error handling section that's wrong. Or with an error handling section that says, there is no error handling section here, go look at 7606, except that doesn't really work because it refers back. And so I think that we just have to do it. If anybody has like a really good, argument for how we can avoid doing this, I'm all ears. Yay, I'll give you a gold star, but I don't see it. So I think we kind of have to roll it in. The other one that I kind of see as being necessary, but I'm pretty open to discussion about exactly how we do it, is we just published this deprecation of AS set thing, 9774. There's kind of a bake time criterion in 6410. It's like, this thing has been deployed and, we're super confident and blah, blah, blah. Well, I cannot with a straight face tell you 9774 has been deployed for years and years and years. On the other hand, I can tell you there's almost no AS sets in the internet. And I can tell you for sure that it would be mean to the implementer to publish a spec that said, send an AS set. Like, it's deprecated. So we either need to take the plunge of just cutting it out, cutting AS set out completely, and if that means we have a little bit more of a discussion as we advance the document, so be it. If we're not comfortable with that, the other approach I can see is, leaving in sort of vestigial discussions of AS set, but fencing them off with a warning that says, go look at RFC 9774. So I think there are ways to solve this, but it has to be solved. And then the other one I came up with that, is probably easy to put in. I don't think it has to, but, why wouldn't we? State machine errors. Okay. These are things I think that we also have to publish somehow as part of the standard, and I think they go forward as independent RFCs because they're well encapsulated, and why would we give ourselves the extra work of rolling them into the base spec instead of just uplifting the specs as they stand. One is multi-protocol BGP. We have to have it IPv6. There are several errata, so we're going to have to BIS that one too, or roll it into the base, I guess, but one of those things has to happen. The other is capabilities. It's a requirement for 4760, so no choice. There's no errata. On a quick skim, it didn't look like there was anything that was like fussed about it. So I think we could just reclassify it. So 1 out of 3 ain't bad, I guess, in terms of saving work. And then I kind of feel like 4-octet is like, come on, people. You can't really have a implementation in the internet today that doesn't support 4-octet. So I think we should do that too. It's not an absolute must, I don't think, but I think it's a really strong should. I mean, in terms of being part of the initial effort. And then there's like a whole lot of other stuff that's like important about BGP, like all of the community stuff is important. There's a lot of other stuff I haven't mentioned that's important. But you know, see early slide about boiling the ocean. Let's this previous list is what I at least think is the minimum necessary set. Let us not go beyond the minimum necessary set. And there is nothing that prevents us from doing follow-on work to say, you know, this should also become part of the standard. This should. The hardest part is taking the first step. The easier parts will be adding other stuff later. So, what's next? I don't have a document for the group to adopt yet, but after talking with Gaetan the other day, he kind of encouraged me to say, let's, you know, I have a thing sitting in GitHub that, you know, thanks largely to Tony's efforts, actually has got all the errata fixed in it. And that's probably you know, worth checking in and using that at least as our baseline document to start iterating on. I also have a version that is completely covered in notes that is not fit to turn into a draft yet, but that, you know, at least has notes towards a lot of the things I've just presented. And mostly what I want to get out of this meeting is the working group supportive of this work? Is the way I've proposed to scope the work the correct scope? Is there stuff that I've left out that should go in? Is there stuff that I've put in that should go out? Is there stuff that I've just forgotten about? And assuming that we're going to move forward, I'm going to need help from a lot of you. I'm not going to name anyone, but some of you have already offered assistance, and I thank you very much. There are things I know better in the spec, and there are things I know less well. So the example that came up in our discussion is, I know the state machine, but there are people in this room who know the state machine really, really well. And if they want to put their well-earned expertise to work on that, that would be awesome. There's also, like, all of you implementers, at some point relatively soon, I'm going to, ask you to validate that your implementation actually complies with, what it is that we're proposing to standardize. Because, remember from the early slide where I said we should be standardizing things that correctly reflect implementation. And, it's our goal not to make anybody's implementation non-compliant. But in order to do that, you've got to go and scrub your implementation. And also, I know that some of you are just like into this kind of thing. Like, please go review the document set, and if I've forgotten the things that must go in or mustn't go in, please share them. Yeah, I guess this is kind of what I already said. It's a working group effort. It's like, yeah, I'm standing up here at the mic. I'm the guy who picked up the draft to start, poking at it. but I really hope that I'm going to be spending a lot of my time just like integrating PRs and stuff like that. And just to repeat it one more time, because it's important, we, as part of this effort, are not inventing any new technology. No new technology. We're just writing down what is already deployed. And hopefully, bringing the sort of 31-year journey of BGP4 to a close before, it gets up to another decade marker. That's it. And I think we still have time for some questions and comments, and I see we have a queue. So Luke, please.
Yes, before we start the queue, so we have about 10 minutes for discussion, and we might be able to roll over a little bit towards the end. 2 specific comments here. As John said, this is going to be an editor-driven effort. So nobody's name besides the editor is really going to go at the top of the draft. There's no incentive for you to be a barnacle as an author. The second thing that is not finalized, but is strongly likely, this work will very likely be heavily anchored on GitHub. We need the issue tracker. There's going to be a ton of details to track here, and managing the patches and the review is going to be critical. And this is the tool that we have that best suits the effort. That said, Luke, you have the mic.
Thank you. Hi, John. This is Luc Hendricks, NLnet Labs. I'll be brief. Is this helpful? Very much so. So thanks for all this. The 4-byte ASN thing, yes, that should be a very, very, very strong shoot. I'd say it should be a must. A question I had, maybe I missed this. You talked about upgrading shoots to musts, which I think makes sense in some places. What about introducing new shoots? Because and I have a specific case in mind, which is about, should we advise to put v4 unicast into MP-reach and LRI instead of putting it at the end of the PDU? This is, I think, a thing that everybody is able to do. It's not part of the original, etc., etc. I guess you understand the case.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion. So actually, I want to take a short aside on the use of like those all capital keywords. Those can cause so much like heartache and argumentation about silly things. Oftentimes, I think that you can get all of the benefit with almost none of the pain by using lowercase words. I agree with the general idea of like, we should have recommendations in the spec that guide people towards doing the right thing. Maybe that's a capital should, maybe it's a lowercase should, but I agree with the spirit of the comment that we should introduce advice into the spec that guides people towards producing what would be the best implementation if they were starting today. Okay.
Thank you.
Hurry up.
Maria from Bird. Several points. First, please do it. I'm going to help. Second thing, please include the 4-byte ASNs. Please do it. Third thing, please take out the AS sets. They do not belong to AS4271 base at all. Please, we should scrap them at all. Because it's already deprecated. It would be stupid in another way. The fourth thing, I sign off what Luke said. We should be able to put v4 NLRIs into MP-reach. And also, I would say it would be very fine if these attributes were always at the end anyway, like at the end of the attribute set, because if I remember correctly, they are always there anyway. And
sorry, which attributes? The MP-reach?
The MP-reach?
Yeah, actually, somebody brought this up to me yesterday that while, I think it was Kier, while bissing the MP-reach spec, that we should, right now it says you should put the MP-reach at the beginning, actually, is what it says, and that we should make that a must. And I think that makes sense.
Yeah, either at the beginning or at the end, but
Yeah.
not in
It should
the
be an
middle,
unknown.
please.
It should be an unknown position, right? It already says that you should put it at the beginning, but I think we can make that a must. I bet.
Yeah. Then another point. Yes, MRAI should be reviewed because I know we have it in our roadmap for last 20 years and it's still not implemented. Another thing is the best route selection, considering multi-exit discriminators, because this is something I have never seen in implementation doing the right thing by default. Please point me to some if they are doing it, us included, that we are not doing it by default the right way. And the last thing, aren't we going to run into the brick wall by not having a young model?
Is there an AD in the room who can comment about brick walls and Yang models?
Okay, so if you look at the revised charter that was, our proposed charter that was shared, one of the things there was to allow the model to go through without a two implementation thing. And hopefully this takes time. That work is already an RFC, but the Yang model. So I don't think we should have a problem where this work gets gated by somebody saying, oh, there is no model or something like that. But I don't think the model will be an internet standard anytime soon.
Cool, thank you.
Rutger.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm quite happy what you presented. Quite obviously, we will need some time for everybody thinking about it and making up their minds about what potential gaps they would like to see filled, what's to be dropped, and so on. But kind of most of what came to my mind was nicely in your presentation. The one question that I have is, well, okay, first I got some indication from what Jeff was telling about the mode of operation. But what I wonder is, do you or do the chairs have any idea about what time frame for this work to be completed will take? And by the way, for time frames, BGP4 and the RFCs, well, okay, the RFC is actually younger than 31 years, but kind of the BGP4 went operational already more than 31 years ago.
I was there.
Yeah, well, okay, spring 94.
So to speak to the time frame, if I had, like, I don't know, I've worked in software my whole career and I've never gotten a time frame right yet. So, you know, with that in mind, I have no expectation that at our next meeting we will be doing the working group last call. That will not happen. I will be disappointed if we're not, you know, at least approaching it by a year from now. Does that seem reasonable to people? Does it seem like something we can work toward? I feel like if you give yourself a deadline, or not soft deadline, let's say, that's more than a year out, it just means that people set the work aside. I think that, at least from my point of view, this is like front of burner work.
Yeah, and part of chair discussion is very much after IETF, we need to have a concerted set of mail list discussions to discuss what is in scope, what is out of scope, and a lot of the implications about what John is talking about. Pick an example. Do you see route reflection here? Do you think BGP should ship without route reflection? People have opinions about this. Sriram.
Sriram, NIST. So I just want to bring up RFC 9234, the BGP role and OTC, which is also relatively new. I wonder if with an RFC like that, the BGP role part necessarily goes into the updated 4271 biz, and maybe not the OTC part. So I just wanted to mention it, but there may be some details that need to be worked out. If maybe the OTC part continues to stay in the RFC 9234, but the BGP role maybe needs to be incorporated into the biz.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you. And actually 4271 even gives us some examples of how to do this, like between 1771 and 4271, confederations got invented. And what 4271 does is it doesn't try to specify confederations, but it does provide pointers to the relevant specifications. So we may end up doing something like that for some of these, important but not core elements of the spec.
Thank you.
Ancient?
Yingzhen Xu from Future Way. So I support this work. Thanks for doing it. But to decide the cluster of RFCs to be included is not an easy work. So take the finance state machine as an example. There are a few RFCs that updated the state machine. So whether to, we can talk in detail later, whether we should include those, just as an example.
Yeah,
So,
you probably know better than I do, but patching the state machine is not as easy as patching the other pieces of text.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I've done it. So, but happy to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alvaro?
Hi, Alvaro Rotana, Future Way. Thank you, first of all, for doing this. I'm happy to help any way you think I can. Read, review, whatever. I was surprised not seeing route reflectors. I think that, I don't know, communities, extended messaging might be part of the core. We don't need to discuss that here, but something to think about. This already, just the 5 or 6 of us that have stood here have all proposed changes. And one of the things you said before is that, of course, we're not inventing anything, but we have to change some things. This is already a very complex project because we're putting things into the document, we're changing some things. Rudiger asked about a timeline. I prefer, instead of a timeline, to see some type of plan. First we're going to do the errata, which we already did. See if the working group likes that. Then we're going to do this. Then we're going to roll in reflectors or whatever. Then we're going to do whatever until we get to the end. Because otherwise, I fear that the conversations are going to overlap and be too complex, and we might not be able to manage the output. Just a suggestion.
Good suggestion. Thank you. If I can speak to your reflector example just for a second. I mean, yes, I agree that that's a really important element of the protocol as deployed. I have been so far with my scrub of the document set trying like crazy to bias towards excluding things unless they absolutely must be included. And as far as I can tell, route reflection is an example of something that, because of the way it was so nicely architected by its inventors, it doesn't change the base spec. So that allows it to stand alone. And I think that allows it to move forward into the standard in the what about all these other things slide,
Correct. It may not have to go into 4271 bis, but it may be like a standalone thing that we promote. Yeah.
Right. This one. It's we can do, there's other stuff that is very important. It just doesn't have to be part of, this is kind of to your, actually, maybe this is the first slide to the, what's the project plan? And maybe part of the project plan is, this stuff is part of the project plan, but it's the tail end of it, not the front end of it. Anyway, we can iterate on the conversation.
Sure. And then the last thing I want to say is that I have no problem in us working in GitHub. However, what I want to make sure is that the chairs and the working group, we all agree on and have a consistent way of doing that. Other working groups do all their work in GitHub. We don't do any work in GitHub, except authors doing it by themselves, but not the working group work. So we need to make sure that we don't exclude people who might not be in GitHub or might not check it regularly or whatever. What other working groups have done, for example, Quick, who did all of their work in GitHub, is they had all the notifications sent to the list. They actually created a separate list to do that, so that everyone who wanted to track everything could just be, could just get email. Of course, what that means is authors, editors, whoever talking about this have to track that as well and bring it back in. And there has to be a lot of transparency and discussion, so that at the end we don't end up with something that someone gets up here and says, "Oh, no, I didn't want to take that out," or "We should have put this in," or something like that. That's something that, of course, I'm glad that the AD and the chairs are going to work on. Thank you.
Yeah, and to answer that specific point, Alvaro, our goal is to be as inclusive as possible. We will very likely be looking for people to be assistant maintainers on that particular repository. The goal for anybody who cannot directly submit patches themselves due to whatever reason would be that our editor staff would generate the necessary diff. People that are submitting the actual patches would be requested to still participate in the review portion of things, even if they don't do the merges and pull requests.
Okay, thank you.
Tony?
Tony Lee, HPE. I just heard John say no new technology, and then I subsequently heard a bunch of people say, but let's make this change. I think that we want to avoid doing exactly that. So I have a process suggestion. If you want to make a change, how about we make those decisions separately? Let John just edit text and try to be clear, and let's make our technology changes in independent documents. And I'll even, at the risk of incurring the wrath of the chairs, I'll suggest we make them separate RFCs.
Thank you, Tony. G, and we have 3 minutes left, so we'll be closing the queue.
I'll be quick. Jidong from Huawei. Yeah, first of all, I fully support this work. It's very useful. And I saw that you mentioned the RFC 6608, the error handling for the FSM subcode, error subcodes. I think it's maybe an example of whether there are other updates about the error codes, subcodes, and error notification related mechanism which can help for the maintenance and the operation of the BGP session, try to make it more stable, or try to help with this kind of troubleshooting. This kind of information may.
Can I respond to that?
Okay.
So if what you're saying is there are other published RFCs that already update various codes, and that we should roll that into our base specs to have a more complete table listed in the base spec, I agree. If you're saying we could do better with error codes and introduce new ones.
Not new ones.
Okay, perfect.
To review the existing ones, yeah.
Okay, and apologies, Rudiger, we're going to cut the queues at this point. Ketan, one last comment.
Thank you. You are the editor, do you need a project manager for prioritization and other stuff?
We can take that offline.
Okay, so thank you, John. This was good discussion.
Thanks, everyone.
Clearly, this is going to be an interesting set of topics. Please watch the mailing list. Please offer your opinions. People are going to have very divided opinions given the topic. So, mailing list is a good place for us to start working this out. So, closing the existing stuff, moving on to the next topic, which happens to be myself. And I'll try to be respectful of everybody else's time. Okay, so I won't be able to watch the queue, so if you could, try to keep the presentation for this fast. We did actually talk about this during IEPG earlier in the week. This is more of an IDR focused version of the same topic. This is work that John Scudder and I are working on for path attribute filtering. So what are we trying to do? We know that filtering is being deployed to address a lot of issues. A lot of these tend to be, some flavor of poisoned BGP packet, for whatever your definition of poison happens to be. It could be valid, invalid, one way or the other, you don't like it. And providers are filtering these things. Particular reason that this is interesting is that we do have features specified in other working groups like this, where some of these things are intended for limited deployment. We have some in IDR that are intended for limited deployment. The problem is what happens when these things escape out of the intended scope. BGP does not actually have good scoping capability on most of its features, although we've been spending a lot of energy on recent specifications to try to actually put in machinery for that. Filtering is not standardized, and right now peers don't have visibility that it's happening. In terms of proposed solution, eBGP peers, this is intended only for eBGP, will exchange a vector of bits that say, here's the path attributes that the speaker does not want. This is a change from the 00 that was earlier published. John and I changed semantics that the 1 bits were the don't want. Obviously, we're not settled one way or the other on what the individual bits mean. This is for discussion. But the important thing is that the originator of a filter is promising that what they get will be filtered. This is a warning to the receiver. And the receiver actually having received this warning is given a chance to take part of this. They're being requested, please don't send this to me in the first place. Don't make me do extra work. So you can look at it as a very strange ORF if you look like. But just as importantly, it gives the sender a chance to maybe take corrective actions. Maybe it strips the attribute in question, or maybe it is sloppy enough that it's just expecting it to be blocked anyway. If one side doesn't support this feature, well, again, this is still an announcement. I'm going to filter these things. You have been warned, and even if you're supporting this but not actually exchanging any of your own, you use this to have visibility into the policy of the far side. Ignis was very kind in his review, and speaking of reviewers, I'd like to thank Robert, Ignis, and Donatus for actually giving us some early feedback on this. Ignis pointed out that my memory of SNP bits having a canonical wire form was not correct. This wire form comes from the BGP MIB. But anyway, it's just basically a string of bits. The idea is that if you don't have all of the bits, which might be up to 32 bytes of them in our current encoding, you can actually send fewer of them. So as an example, bits that you actually would like and don't like, here's an example of some of our very common things that are features that we expect to work in normal BGP and should not be filtered. So obviously the question is, once you start specifying these things, what could be filtered? Well, ideally you pick operationally useful things and decide they're part of the set that should be allowed to pass through. So we're building profiles of how these work. So communities, only the customer, those are things we should let through in a common ISP environment. Things that we may not want to let through without configuration are things like AIGP that already requires configuration. There's nothing that prevents escape. Prefix SID, there's absolutely nothing that prevents escape, and we've had outages related to that recently. Thank you, Bess. But even though the RFC procedures are supporting some of these things and actually offer advice for filtering, attribute escape is a problem. We've talked about that before. This is an attempt to codify some of the machinery for that. BGPLS being another example of you configure the protocol extension, the DAFI-SAFI, well, you're saying you're willing to accept the capability and the path attribute. The longer conversation and where this gets messy and where we'll be running this conversation through the operators is, what is our default policy for these things? Today, BGP is very permissive. And the whole reason for that is this is what we need for incremental deployment of new features. And as much as we've had operators say, this is the internet, it's done, ship your full standard, shut down IDR, go home. Well, people obviously aren't doing that, and then they come around and say they want things like large BGP communities. So even the operators occasionally want new things themselves just for internet. Obviously, where you are in the internet matters in terms of how important this is. If you're a Leaf AS, you can filter everything you want to. And some very large operators, pick your favorite social media site, are effectively, from the perspective of BGP, a Leaf AS. They can filter out everything they want. But if you're a transit provider, the story changes. So this is going to be very contentious. What should we be filtering? Should it be aggressive? You are making choices as a provider that's providing transit for your downstream customers. Answering some questions we had in the mailing list. Why not AFI-SAFI? Well, some of these things are effectively scoped features. BGPLS is an example of that. But once the implementation understands that this feature is being spoken, BGPLS being an excellent example of that, filtering is done by implementations that know what the feature is supposed to do. This is a very coarse level filter. Well, what about the one administrative domain proposal? We want to actually take the fact that, well, confederations aren't a popular feature and are hard to deploy during certain types of network mergers. Well, maybe we take the common practice where multiple ASs belong to a single domain and start being leaky about what we do. That draft's a little bit new. It doesn't really discuss anything aside from configuration about how it should be implemented. And maybe it could benefit from this, but maybe it doesn't. That is TBD. They need to figure out their own story as much as figuring out how our story here may integrate with that. Bigger question, what do we do about updating the filter? This is a capability in the current proposal. It's exchanged at startup. Obviously, Graceful Restart can help with this picture, and part of the interesting conversation for some of these features, just like the dynamic capability discussion we'll have later, is under what circumstances can the implementation fully resynchronize everything except maybe at startup. It might be an implementation limitation, it might be some protocol issues. So there's at least some piece of the discussion there. Obviously, dynamic capabilities might be a good fit for exactly this thing. Question that Robert asked is why not ORF? As people know, I'm not particularly fond of that feature. It does have roughly the right shape for the filtering capability. It runs a little bit late in the process. Obviously, we could try to mandate changes to ORF, but end of the day, this is not a highly dynamic thing. So throwing it into a highly dynamic filtering mechanism where the expectation is that refreshes are done as part of it may or may not be a good fit. This is up for discussion. In terms of next steps, the goal here right now is to socialize what we're looking to do. This is going to obviously, again, be contentious. Encoding is not something that we have our souls set on for a specific thing. Let's do the right thing on the wire. And maybe we move to adoption once we have some discussion. So I see that there are multiple people in the queue. So if you wouldn't mind managing the queue ingress.
Bruno's next.
Bruno de Crane Orange. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the draft. Do you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, thank you. I have read the draft very quickly, so I may be wrong. I believe that the draft allows for the peer to either filter the attribute or the root.
At the moment, in terms of the behaviors, we have block the route, and we also have discard as a possible implementation detail. Block is the expected behavior rather than strip.
I think it's not clearly reflected in the abstract. If you read the draft very, very fast, you believe it's only about attribute filtering. So it would be easier for the reader to understand that you also include root filtering.
Sorry, Bruno, I'm having some difficulty understanding this room. Yes, we can certainly clarify in the abstract that detail.
Thank you. And I think it's either attribute filtering or root filtering is very different. So I think the semantic is not very clear. I would prefer to have a single semantic, or both if you want. But for me, root filtering is much more aggressive.
Okay, we'll take that feedback and look at it in the next revision.
Thank you.
Nan Chen, you're next.
Okay, Nangang from Huawei. A question, let's consider a case where both sides have been upgraded to support the features, and one side wants to send and receive pass attribute 1, and the other side doesn't want to send and receive this pass attribute. So the negotiation will fail, right? So how do we handle this case? Just stop the negotiation, or we can just negotiate part of the attributes? That's my question.
Okay, so this actually touches 2 points. First one is assuming that we have the mechanism to update the filter. A consequence of the change of the format from 00 to 01 is we're unilaterally declaring what each side wants to filter. There's no longer a negotiated version of this, so it is now unidirectional. You can make unidirectional choices. I think that addresses your concern.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, you're next.
David Lamparter, FR Routing. On the side that receives the filter and the sending updates, I think as it's written right now, it's definitely too open in what that side should do. But in general, I'm not sure I want to place a lot of requirement on that side at all. I think this feature is more useful as a debugging aid on the side sending the updates to identify that things are in fact going wrong. And in more specific, we have had implementation issues where implementations have generated attributes that they shouldn't. And relying in that case on the buggy implementation to apply this filter correctly, since we're already outside the scope of normal operation, I'm not sure I would want to rely on that. So,
just addressing your concerns very quickly. So the advertisement is the advertising side is the promising to filter this. It is asking the sender to take part in this, much like an ORF, much like RT constrain, just simply because there is benefit if a sender doesn't waste its bandwidth sending things that will be thrown away.
I think it's currently a must on the sender. I would rather have that they should and allow the sender to still send the attribute, even especially if we do some kind of batching or grouping in outgoing updates, and then rather have the sender indicate an error to the operator or somewhere else.
Okay, I understand the implementation motivation. Let us continue on the list.
Alvaro, you're next.
Okay, there we go. Thanks. So, allora Tana Fichway. I'm the author of one of the authors of the OED draft that you mentioned there. The way I read this, I think these are complementary, because to me, OED is a type of external peering, and if this is applied to external peering, then they can complement each other. So I don't think it's one or the other. The other thing I want to say is that you mentioned cases where there are attributes that are expected because of the SAFI or that we negotiate. I just skimmed through the draft, but I wish that, or I hope that it is very well specified what happens if in the capability, I say no, but at the same time I negotiated the SAFI. If that's going to be something kind of weird or what takes precedence and things like that. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can throw in clarification, but the expected behavior at the moment is if I say I want BHBLS and filter the LS attribute, things are going to break very weirdly.
Oh, so the capability takes precedence over the SAFI.
At the moment.
See,
open for discussion.
Right, I would prefer it the other way around.
Understood.
Can I? Yep. Maria from BERT. Two things. One, we have already deprecated AS sets. Could we please drop the aggregators from the complete default included? And the second thing is, well, on the other hand, I'd like to see everything default on by the completely default on, because most of the implementations won't support everything. So if they would say, well, let's allow only these attributes we actually support, this is actually going to break the new features. So please, everything default on unless it's actually intended to stay in. Thank you.
Thank you for your opinion about default procedure. Please take that to the discussion. With regard to aggregation, John, I think, has some opinion.
Actually, I have a clarifying question about what you mean by default on. Do you mean default the bit to being on, meaning I'm going to block this?
No.
So by default, I will block everything, or do you mean by default everything should be permitted?
Permit or deny? Which one?
Permit.
Yeah.
Permit is the opinion. AC.
AC Linda Marcus. I read this rather quickly, so apologies if this is covered. I noticed, I mean, you have bits for mandatory attributes, and I know some of these mandatory attributes after the new AFI-SAFIs came in, they really aren't mandatory for those, but they are mandatory. I mean, there's things we could leave out of BGPLS SPF if they weren't mandatory. So how do you filter mandatory and remain backward compatible?
The answer is we don't. Part of the procedure that needs clarification is we want to leave the spaces in there for consistent, easy decoding, but some of these things should never be used for filtering. Tony.
Just a small point. Aggregation is not actually dependent on AS set. You can aggregate things that have identical path attributes without requiring an AS set.
Thank you. And thanks for the feedback. We do know this is going to be contentious. We do also think that it's an important piece of modern plumbing we need to be discussing. Operators are deploying filtering, and we need to do something sane about it. So I'm looking forward to more feedback on the list. We'll go ahead and resume our agenda. Thank you. I'm attempting to pass slide control. It is sticking.
Yes, okay. Can you hear me, Jeff?
I can. I can't tell if you've taken control. Okay, looks like you have.
I have, yes. Hi, folks. My name is Srihari Sangli. I'm from HPE. I'm going to be presenting a second update on BGP dynamic capability. Last IETF session, we had the session on this topic. After a number of years, that was the sort of introduction to why do we need it. And then we have an updated document that I'm going to take the next few minutes to go over the primary changes in that. Anki Chan and I are the authors of this, and I'm presenting on behalf of Anki. Right. Quick, these are the three things. Just going to give a quick update on what are the changes. More details are on the slide or on the document, and then just talk about what is this enhanced dynamic capability, what will it solve, and then talk about the next steps. Okay, so first of all, the revising the capability during the lifetime of a session, that's the whole point of dynamic capability, is the local speaker initiates this revision, and the remote speaker acknowledges, as simple as that. But the thing is, we need to also make sure what capabilities can be revised, provided the remote speaker has the enough plumbing to support the revision. So the whole point is you get the control that what local speaker can revise is dependent on whether the remote speaker is capable of handling that. And dynamic capability is a capability, so it gets advertised in the open message. Only then the two speakers can exchange the dynamic capability messages. The value field of the capability of the dynamic capability is list of all the capabilities that a local speaker has the plumbing to support the revision. Okay. The whole point of making sure that when do I turn on the capability on the router, it is dependent on how do I determine that the capability messages exchanges has informed the local speaker about, yes, I do now see a demarcation point that I can take a action. So this we call it as a demarcation point. So both the speakers have to identify the demarcation at their own specific steps, which I'm going to cover in the next set of steps. So once they identify the demarcation, then the capability on the respective speaker goes into effect. Until then, the state of the BGP and the capabilities remains the same without any change. Now, in the previous version that has always been there until version 16, we supported multiple revisions on a capability instance. In this version 17, we are making sure that the multiple revisions of a capability instance has to be serialized, which means you don't send multiple up down sort of a thing on the same capability. However, for different capabilities, you can send them in parallel. In the version 16 and prior, we had the sequence number that was effectively used to identify how are these multiple revisions of a capability instance can be managed, can be tracked. Given that we are serializing, the sequence number is now going to be used only for diagnostic as to whether did I receive the acknowledgement or any message for the revision that I sent. And like we have seen, there are single instance capabilities and multi-instance capabilities. This goes back to the MP Reach multi-protocol extensions that listed a number of office in it. Pretty much that is the multi-instance capabilities. Rest are all single instance because they all talk about either a specific, a simple route refresh or a graceful restart with a timer, or even any capability that specifically talks about one particular office. And as part of the as part of the revision, capability revision, the two-way handshake effectively gets us what we want. We are mandating the local speaker, which initiates the revision request for an ACK for all capability revisions. So this is one. And thanks to Tony Pragenda for identifying that we need to have a time limit, because there is going to be an issue where what if one of the speakers gets into trouble and doesn't acknowledge. So at least the local speaker or the remote speaker can have a time and they can get out of the capability revision procedure. Because the initiator encodes only one capability, because that's what we are serializing. So the dynamic capability message has only one capability instance encoded. But given that there are some implementations, maybe deployments, that the old receiver, the old initiator can send multiple capability instances in the message. So we are asking the receiver, the new receiver, to handle multiple capability revisions in one message. We've had this discussion on the mailing list as well. The intention is to make sure this capability machinery, the dynamic capability machinery, works for most used capabilities. So given that, we are recommending that this dynamic capability message revisions can be used for single instance or multi-instance capabilities, except those that change the structure of the message. Case in point, add back. And continuing on the error handling, one thing that the version 16 and prior did not say much about is what if you run into notification or error handling that you need to send notification, what happens to the dynamic capability revision. What we are saying is now in version 17, if there's an error that is encountered and the speaker has to send notification, then basically the dynamic capability revision is discarded. And likewise, the unknown sequence number is deprecated because you don't get to use it. And the interesting thing is even the dynamic capability itself can be revised. And that means, during the lifetime of a session, a speaker can then permit more capabilities to be revised. That means the remote speaker can send any revisions based on what the local speaker allows it to. This is very useful when you do a hitless upgrade, that the new BGP speaker that comes up after a hitless upgrade is now capable of supporting multiple capabilities revisions. So therefore, the dynamic capability itself can be revised. Sorry, I'm going to skip through this. This is fairly explained in the slide. In the interest of time, this is a local procedure of what the two speakers need to talk about to exchange to exchange the messages for dynamic capability revisions. Backward compatibility, I talked about in the last session. There are only two scenarios. There is no backward compatibility issue if we do this, which is the new initiator, because of the version 17, what we're recommending, it always asks for acknowledgement. The old receiver is the one that has implemented version 16 or prior. It always honors it because that's what the version 16 talks about. And if the old initiator asks for it, then the new receiver will honor ACK request. So therefore, there is no backward compatibility, even if there are any implementations or deployments of the old spec. That's the dynamic capability that we have in the draft. But one thing that I left out was with respect to limitations, any capabilities that do change the structure has an issue, and we are avoiding that capability to be revised dynamically. We have this draft that we can present in the next session, but at least that gives us an ability to allow dynamic capability revisions even for add path kind of capabilities, which do change the structure. We have certain, message structures, messaging formats for ACK conform, NAC, and things like that to support better coordination. With that, do I have any feedback, questions on both implementers, operators on this?
Okay, and we have time for the one question in the queue. Krishna Swami.
Yeah, Krishna Swami, Cisco Systems. Thanks, Sherry, for updating the newer version with adding a lot more clarity. So I have a few questions. I'll take it in the mailer, but there are a couple of them I wanted to bring it up here. Can we leave the ACK mandatory for the capabilities itself rather than enforcing every capability to request an ACK, right? Why, in other sense, let's not even make it mandatory. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, your line is not, my internet connectivity is not very good, so I think I've understood the question. Are you able to hear me, Jeff?
We're able to hear you, but we are running shorter time, so we need to be brief. But what I think I'm hearing is that working through some examples of the state machine in the mailing list might actually be a productive exercise.
Okay, sure. I can
one thing
take it up.
We do have examples in the presentation as well as in the document. Deployment scenarios. Maybe we can look at it, and then we can definitely discuss in the mailing list.
And yeah, unfortunately, we've run out of time for the presentation, Srihari.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Mankamna Mishra from Cisco Systems. So before I start, so this draft not presenting to trigger any debate here, because after presentation I need to go for shopping, so I need to be in free mind. So today we are going to only talk about the problem statement and some of the solutions, potential solution, and we would like to get input from the working group so that we can have a clear consensus solution coming in the next IETF. Just going towards the problem statement. So we have a bunch of label allocation mode, which is per prefix, per verb, and per next hop received label. Today, we are going to talk about the third option, which is per next hop received label, and what is the problem it is bringing in some of the network topology. And most probably, it is for the cases where we are either rewriting the next hop or we have next hop self configured in route reflector. So this particular picture, it is a very base case, and I have taken very simple topology to explain the problem statement. Here, two of the route reflectors. It could be route reflector or it can be ASBR, and you can have complex topology as well. The problem is when we have, let's say, per VRF label in P1, But both of these route reflectors, if they are ASBR, they don't have any capability of VRF, or we don't provision VRF here. So we might end up doing per prefix label. If we do per prefix label, there will be a scale challenge. So we may run out of labels very soon. So we may go with the third choice of the label, where we were doing per next hop and received label. So let's say that if we go with that model, and these of two route reflectors are ASBR, they are also connected to support BGP PIC for faster convergence. So in this case, at the step 1, when P1 sends any prefix with label 100, so what is going to happen in route reflector 1? So it receives a label 100 from the next hop P1. So it is going to allocate the local label, which is 200, and it is going to send it towards RR2 and P2 both side. Same thing is going to happen at RR2, where it receives a label from P1 and it allocates its own local label and sends it to RR1 and P2. Till this point, everything is good. What is going to happen next? When RR1 receives a BGP update from the next hop RR2 with a label, what it is going to do, it is going to repeat the same mechanism. And it is going to allocate one more label, because for RR1, it has absolutely no clue that it is we are getting the same prefix back. So we are going to allocate one more label, and the label update will be sent towards P2 and RR2 as well. And this continues. And if this continues, we are going to exhaust the label space. This was the original problem defined in draft. And there are multiple different variations of the same problem statement. So you can have multi-homing, you can have single CE with 2P model. So there are multiple different variations where we will end up going into the same situation. The original draft had provided a solution using secondary label attribute. And there were a lot of debates over Miller, and there were a lot of discussion. And we authors, we started rethinking that, is it the right way to go, or maybe there are some different ways where we should take the solution forward. Two of the solution which comes into the mind is either we use NHC attribute or we use extended community. NHC attribute is already being discussed, and it has its own benefit. It has maybe some pros and cons, and that is where we would like to get input, that which way will be better for this particular solution, whether to go extended community way or NHC way. And definitely in before next IETF, we would like to have a discussion where we can clearly carve out. We can't say that one is better versus other. Both of them have their own side effects. So which direction will be better to go is what we plan to do by next IETF. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, and we have time for maybe very direct question if there's anything, but what we're really hearing is the authors are looking to solve a problem and are looking for discussion. Mailing list is a great place to do this, and if you have interest in helping the authors out, we look forward to the next proposal, next IETF otherwise. Thank you. Next presentation is on IFIT.
Chair, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We're going to have to give you no more than 7 minutes.
Okay. Okay. I'm Xiaomi from Chile Telecom. BGP extensions to enable BGP flow spec based effect. The motivation and the objectives. With the evolution of IP carried networks towards the intent-based and autonomous networks. Flexible deployment of effect based on network dynamics and service requirements is the gateway masters. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Uh, 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 next slide, please. Next, please.
You have slide control.
Next, please. Yeah.
I will take slide control, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Motivation and objectives. With the evolution of IP-carried networks with internet-based and autonomous networks, flexible deployment of a field based on network dynamics and service requirements is getting must. This draft defines the BGP extensions to distribute BGP flow spec based on traffic filtering together with affected information, so that affected behaviors can apply to the specified flow automatically. In this way, the affect is automatically labeled and running solutions and define a new BGP path attribute, a fate attribute, which is a comparison of a set of TLVs defined two fate types, the IOM types and the watermark types. Define the multiple fate attribute sub TLVs for the IOM types 1, define 4 sub TLVs, including IOM allocated trace options. IOM implement trace option. IOM directly export options and IOM easy trade options. For the automatic type 2, define two sub TLVs, including alternate markings sub TLV and enhanced alternate market TLVs, and define a new traffic assembly actions. Traffic assembly extended communities used to carry the subroute information for monitoring. Next slide, please. BGP flow spec operations with effect attributes, label effects. Generally, in operate network has centralized controllers determines the particular use traffic to be monitored according to the service requirements. The centralized controllers also needs to determine the effect type applied to the specified traffic flows. The centralized controller sends the BGP flow spec update message to the head device, carry any NI and effect and traffic assembly extended communities if present, and the head device automatically generates SLs according to the received traffic fed rules and encapsulate that's a fate for the incoming specified traffic flow packets. Disable effects once the centralized controllers determine to stimulate and monitor the specified traffic flows, it can withdraw the corresponding NLI routers. The head device will remove the SLs related to the traffic fed rules and stop encapsulating a fate for incoming specified traffic flow packets. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Airline considerations. Okay. Airline comments and suggestions will welcome.
Thank you for the
That's
presentation.
all. Thank you.
We have no comments or questions in the room. This mechanism is very interesting because it's making use of FlowSpec as a way of dynamically injecting things for dynamic debugging purposes. Please take a look at this, and please also keep in mind this will be a fit discussion for FlowSpec version 2. Thank you for your presentation, Xiaoming.
Thank you.
We're at our last presentation for the day. 1 second, please.
Sure.
There we go. You are now Now you're good to go.
Hi, Jacob Horn, Cisco Systems, on behalf of the authors of this draft. We want to introduce BGP UPA. Essentially, with the evolution of the IP underlay networks, summarization takes place to increase the scale of the network. And it brings the issue with the summarization that egress PE failure is hidden from ingress PE behind the summary or aggregate route. This results in a very slow convergence using just a regular BGP overlay convergence. And goal of this draft is basically to trigger BGP peak based on passing unreachability information through the aggregate route of the BGP. IGP already solved this using IGP UPA and essentially using kind of infinite metric in ISIS, in OSPF both. So this is how the convergence will look like without the UPA in a BGP. So basically, if there is a primary egress PE1, secondary egress PE2, and primary egress PE fails, then that information is not propagated towards the ingress PE, and ingress PE has to wait for full BGP convergence in overlay, which is by default very lengthy and very long, and results in prefix dependent convergence. With the UPA, if we introduce UPA, basically we'll add signaling of unreachability of the primary egress PE in a case of failure based on IGP information or based on the losing the next hop. We propagate that through the BGP towards the ingress PE, and ingress PE can immediately trigger the BGP peak, and convergence is in order of magnitude faster. So question is how to propagate that unreachability of the egress PE through the BGP, because there is no mechanisms to do that. We considered several options, but for backward compatibility and for the security, right now, to us, the best option seems to be to send just plain MP unreach for the prefix, which was never received before. That way, we will propagate the information about the unreachability of the egress PE to the ingress PE, and the ingress PE can react on them by triggering BGP peak. The other options was to use BGP reach. Other option was to introduce a new attribute count point, or even consider new BGP SAFI. Overall, we consider all those different options. We consider them less secure and more complex. There is one more thing which is introduced in a draft, and it's essentially the timer, or kind of hold of timer, how long the ingress PE or midpoint PE should hold that information about the UPA, because that UPA information is just sent once time to be being processed, but obviously we want to hold it to ensure we are not replicating same information many times from the midpoints, and to make sure we are able to converge to original BGP best path selection algorithm. So that's essentially the thing. So questions are, okay, applicability, obviously it's not meant to be for the internet. It's not meant to be on by default, and it has to be always contained within the domain of the particular service provider. And it's very specific to overlay, underlay, convergence scenarios. So next steps, very simple. This is first attempt. We obviously see big demand for such a feature, such a thing. Question is mainly, is it a good approach? Is it the right solution? So we are happy to have any feedback on the way of signaling, and we are also happy to have feedback on how to whether there are other options than the timer to get information about the restored PE reachability. Thank you.
John?
John Scudder, HPE. Would you mind returning to slide 5?
Yes. I don't know which slide, slide 5, this one.
Keep going one.
Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, thanks for this. I understand the problem case. I don't love it. I don't love it in the IGP either, but you know, it is what it is, right? It's like routing is a constant struggle between aggregation for scalability and deaggregation for timeliness. And here we go again, one more time. With respect to the approach you've chosen, I don't quite understand why option number 2 has a danger on it, because that would have been like my first thought.
That was first thing we came with, but if you don't understand MP unreach, and I will send, you won't understand UPA, and I will send you the MP reach, you will propagate it further, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can, I guess, discuss this further offline.
Yes.
But like basically my hack would be that you send an MP reach for something that you know for a fact that the receiver will consider to be unreachable.
Yes.
Yeah, like
But-
basically an unresolvable MP
Yeah,
reach.
but, well, okay, I have to send it via route reflector, right? Because I potentially, and that route reflector can propagate it basically everywhere because he doesn't understand NP reach. But this is basically feedback we are looking for. These were the options we were considering. Our first thought was NP reach as well, and I'm happy to discuss that further into the detail.
Cool.
Thank you
Basically,
very
I
much.
would prefer to have a solution that introduces as few as possible exception cases into the existing processing.
Let's discuss that, because this is exactly, we believe this is the way we are achieving that, but let's discuss that. Happy to do that.
Right, and I have I think final comment for the session. So your option 3, overlap with what John's saying. MP unreach is our way of deleting state from the system. To say that there would be stratospheric level of obstacles to overcome to turn that into injecting state into the system, we're probably going to look at something else. We are aware that this feature was somewhat contentious in LSR as well. We understand the use case. Certainly, you can continue working on this in IDR way to carry the state, but I think you're looking at something besides option 3.
Happy to discuss that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, and this ends our session for IDR. We will see you in Montreal. There are several things going on the list. Please respond to the link bandwidth updates and last call comments, and please let us know about the drafts that were discussed here today. There's lots of requests for feedback. Thank you very much, and thank you, Sue and G.